I know we've got some folks who will continue coming in as we go along, but I would like to welcome you to what is unfortunately been called a pier farm out on the...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We love you, but we love you. And instead I called it a dinosaur forum because it seemed more appropriate.
Yeah, I
Because
can
we
do
know
that.
who we are. Mindy, come for some.
Oh, you're going to the left. There you go.
That's my Raven, this is Melinda. Melinda, that's Raven. Getting that Raven.
You didn't know you were as old as me.
For those of you who don't quite know what you got into here, I would like to welcome you to some of the founders of Atenveldt. All of the folks that you see here before you are from Atenveldt of the 1970s and helped literally to found what you do now. We appreciate that Master Raven decided that it would be a wonderful thing to be able to let us abuse you with our memories, such as they are.
Less and less progressive. I don't know, the old stuff.
But
Yeah.
we promise not to lie too much or too long.
As I remember it.
As I
You promised not to lie.
it's not a lie. What's it called?
Hagiography.
Hagiography. We make it up as we go. What I'd like to do first is just a momentary opportunity to let these folks kind of tell you who they were and who we are, and also just a moment about who we are today, because my perspective on the SCA is that the skills that I birthed in the SCA as a 17-year-old and 18-year-old, I honed in a profession and then have applied in the 21st century. So I think it's very appropriate to acknowledge that just because we're old doesn't mean that we quit being who we were at that time. We actually utilize those skills. So if we could start here, for obvious reasons, okay? I would like to have each of these folks, just 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, who you were, this much on what you did, this is gonna be longer, and who you are today.
Okay. I'm Richard Ironsteed, and I started this thing.
You started
I started Atenveldt and brought it down from the Bay Area. And then a couple of years later, I won the first round tournament and served as the first king. And I'm trying to think what I've done since then.
How about Marshal of the SCA?
Yeah, I was Marshal of the SCA.
For how long?
Too long.
How long?
Let him go. Don't believe him.
Long. And, yeah.
We're trying to stop that. The 70s.
And what else did I do?
Actually, it's earlier than the 70s, because you
Yeah.
introduced us to the concept in '68.
Introduce
We
yourself.
talked about it, and we actually, in '69, started playing around with it and had that first tourney.
Introduce
Yeah.
yourself.
Oh, I'm Master Charles of the Jacks. Again, one of the founders of Atenveldt. I refuse to call it Atenveldt. And,
You almost did, didn't you?
yes, and my claims to fame initially was making weapons and armor. Because when we started, we had 2 helmets. And there was nothing more fun than the guy before you had been sweating into this helmet. He squished it off his head, and then you got a chance to squish it on your head to share his. So I made the first helmets, I made the first actual full suit of plate armor.
Which had its own name, by the way.
Seymour.
Seymour is the first suit of armor down there, so that's parts of it.
Yeah, that's an answer to a question.
Okay, so who else is, I don't want to go in order, but I know that, Leonora, what would you like to tell us?
Well,
Yeah.
in 1970, my best friends and I, there were 4 of us, we became called the Zagnuts because we were House Zagamore and we were 17. The collective noun was the Giggle of Zagnuts, Moria, of course. But we had seen an article in the Arizona Republic Sunday magazine cover showed now Duke Arthur and Duke
Of
Richard.
Lockhaven.
Of Lockhaven, Duke Richard the Short of the West, and a couple other people at a tournament. And
Boys.
yeah, boys and medieval stuff. And so we finally went to attorney after we sent one of the other ladies' older sister, now Bantay Mariah Zagamore, founding Baroness of Turiskethir, to check it out. She said it would be okay, so we went to a tournament. And all but one of us met our husbands that very first day. Mine, who had been was a professional dancer at the time, jetted over a table, genuflected and kissed my hand. Now that's a line. But we were married for 35 years. But it was a wonderful time. It was exciting. It was romantic. We had so much fun, and we learned so much. We started researching medieval clothing. It was very frustrating in the 70s. There was very little development.
And a lot of it was wrong.
And a lot of, and they,
Most of it
hey,
was
they
wrong.
tested out what was there.
How much-
I'm sorry, Dennis,
Yes.
you and I believe, came to the event immediately after that, and that we came to the very first same event.
Yes, we did.
Would you like to talk about
Well, you see, Karen and I are young.
it? We're the babies, they
These
consider us
guys
the
are
children.
old.
These guys are newbies still.
Yeah, we're the newbies.
Now, wait a minute.
The
This
people
one in the
this line-
middle.
Now, this was a very young lady.
I was there. You were there.
But these folks were all there when I came to the society in
I
'85.
wasn't.
The people who've spoken already were.
All right, people have spoken already. Kid. I'm Dennis of the Titans, 11th King of Atenveldt, 3rd and 5th Prince of the Sun, Earl Marshal, Seneschal, and Chancellor of the Exchequer of Atenveldt, twice for Earl Marshal.
And the
those-
father of kingdoms.
This is true.
You
I've
and
been
Deaton and I,
many
father
kingdoms.
and mother kingdoms.
In the early days in Atenveldt, every time it would come up to the board, we've got new groups over here, which kingdom wants them, and everybody else would go. We got too much already, and Atenveldt would go, us.
Manifest destiny.
Manifest
We never,
destiny,
we never
seek
got
to
the
shine and
actual
see.
manifest destiny. It had to stop at the western Arizona border, but we had everything to the east.
I owned Calafia for about 6 months and stretched it all. Lost that war, but we owned it for about 6 months. Anyway, by the time I won Crown, it was very obvious there was no way to govern it. There was no internet. Long distance was ridiculously expensive. Airfares were even more ridiculously expensive, so there was no way to govern. I won Crown in October of '75, and in January of '76, we went to the board of directors and said, we need to fix this. And that started the move to creating the outlands.
They were out
Onsiora,
there, everything was out there.
Meridians, etc. Yeah. And the Principality of the Sun for Arizona, which is now the Kingdom of Atenveldt, was all
Again.
created over the duration of 2 reigns.
No,
3
I think,
reigns.
I think it took
Actually-
5 is what it took,
Well,
but
once they all had coronets.
once we all started
But
to.
2 board meetings during my reign, the principalities were established.
I'm Kara Cherie of the Fallen Stars, and I'm Deaton's Duchess, but he joined the SCA even later than I did by like a year. So the first event that Dennis and I went to was actually the second Crown tournament
Yep.
of Atenveldt.
March 1971.
The lady
before
who's now my
1975.
sister-in-law was Queen with Richard Ironstein and Felicia of the Southern Comfort, and we got to see Duke Arthur of Lockhaven win the crown for the first time,
Yep.
it was an amazing experience because we were creating it as we went along. It was at Biltmore Fashion Park, you know.
It's
We
now
had
a
green
parking
grass.
garage.
It's now a parking garage. Green grass. It was absolutely lovely, but so many things happened. Most of these gentlemen early on lived in the same house.
Yep.
They ran Kingdom Central out of the house. I was Kingdom Secretary, which was not an official position, but it meant I answered phones, I called people back, I sent letters for about, I don't know, 3-4 years.
Made events
I don't
happen.
know how long. We did that kind of thing because everything got run out of one location initially. Once we started moving into the newer age, which is what Dennis is talking about, the changes in Atenveldt, then obviously there were lots more places and individuals involved, but it was very close-knit at first, and in many ways, we still are. Richard, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I want to expand on something you said, which is, in the beginning, none of us knew what the hell we were doing.
Absolutely right.
We were making it up as we went along. Now, some of it we later decided wasn't a good idea. For example, the award that we gave at Revels to the person who got the most swinishly drunk.
No, happily drunk, if you please. I won it, did you?
No.
The inebriated.
Inebriated award.
But can we give some things up?
You know, and there were,
I'm sorry.
Some things we
I was
needed
trying to
leave
figure out
behind.
who joined next, and I think it was Lynn and Nichelle, who was a baby in arms. She was the SCA, the Kingdom of Atenveldt's first child.
Yeah.
First child. Lynn.
Second, but first one that was around, because Maria's son was around.
Oh, and
That's
didn't really
right.
come to much.
I didn't.
So your first event was Ralph the Riches?
Absolutely.
yes.
Lynn, we had an event at Enchanto Park before Ralph the Riches in May, because that's the first time John and I met.
Oh.
But,
Highland Games, wasn't it?
no, it was actually, it was Firebird Festival of the Arts,
But
and
it's
it's where we
held in Enchanto.
discovered the SCA. That was, we were in the crowd. The first person that I met was Cherie, who taught me everything there was to know about the clan and got me all head up to join the Clan Lorraine. And
So
Sean.
were you in the Zagamar Pavilion with Jeffrey and his movement?
That was her.
There were households, there's still households, there were households. But the large households in the organization, one of them, the banner is here, what happened to it?
It's down there.
Casa Libre
Casa
was one
Libre.
of the very first households, that was the group that all lived together. Households in the SCA. Clan Lorraine was another one, and I ended up being Kara Cherie because of Cherie that was mentioned, she was the lady of the clan. And an amazing,
And that
an
banner,
amazing
by the way,
person.
was made by the first princess of Atenveldt.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The banner, the.
Was made by the first
princess of
We
Atenveldt.
had three princes and princesses in a row, and then we rested they gave us a charter for our kingdom, and we became the Kingdom of Atenveldt chartered by the Kingdom of the West.
January 16th, 1971.
Can I kick in a piece of history?
Yeah.
By all means.
We were the first principality, Atenveldt. So we were the first kingdom to be spun off. from
We're also
crown.
the first barony.
Also
So,
the first barony of the known world.
When we say we wrested our kingdom, we literally took our demand to the crown of the West. Said, we demand our crown, it's ours, it's our right. And if you think about how coronation goes, we accede to your just demand. It's still written in the ceremony. That's exactly what the crown of the West said to us.
And the king crowns himself.
And said, schedule a crown tourney. Thank you, Your Majesty, we have, can you be there?
Your Grace, what's your earliest memory in the SCA?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's hard chronologically because all of my
Babies don't have
memories as a child were there.
childhood.
Yeah. I would say honestly, Alwyn House, just running around in Alwyn House in general was probably there. I mean, there was somebody fell into the pond.
Every time we were there. Alwyn House is still there. It's downtown. It's an old building that's used for the arts. The SCA used to hold revels there, which was really a lot of fun, and they have an adorable little pond, you know, it's full of greenery, and it has a koi that like to be petted, you know what I mean? And somebody would get snockered and fall in, and it happened. They started charging us to have to replace the water lilies and the fish. because
It was her fault as a baby, partially, that I married to this one.
Oh, that's true.
Because I remember you at a very early event, one of the first I went to, kind of crawling around on Baldrich the Bulgarian's back.
And don't
this-
let him tell you that story.
And this one was kind of playing with you and being nice to you, and I could tell that despite the fact that he said he hated children and small furry animals, he would make a good daddy, so.
But we can't do that.
We've now been married for 40 years.
Yay, me. Part of how that happened too is that we taught Nikki how to read when she was really, really little. We gave her an alphabet book. And it was a great alphabet book with Q is for queen and K is for king and et cetera. So Seymour was an integral part of Michelle's growing up because she realized quickly that if he was laying down in exhaustion, which sometimes Seymour made him do, she could sit on him.
Baldwin.
No.
Charles.
So she climbed up and got in his face and said, "You're going to read to me." And he said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are." Yes, you were. And they had about a 5-minute conversation where she finally, the next thing I know, Chuck was reading, "Q is for queen." Not in a very friendly fashion.
And we used to tell Nikki stories down in Iskather, that when she would get to be, she's a baby when we first, when I first joined. And when she starts going to school and the people ask, "What does your daddy do?" "My daddy's king." And what happens when she grows up and starts dating and daddy's sitting there with a sword if somebody comes to try and
all
get her?
came to fruition, every little bit of it.
We used to tell Nikki stories.
What I'd like to do next is figure out, because we started moving in other directions, and I'm not sure who all came from where. I just found out today that you came from Tariskather.
Yes.
Not a Tariskather too, Bartholomew, or were you from here?
No, I was from here.
You were from here? And
But his
Lynn-
sister was from there, kind of.
Okay, can you explain a little bit about that, and then we'll come back? Because I'm not sure exactly where the timeline goes. Melinda, I know that.
I'm the last, I am the baby.
Okay.
Okay, well, I found, I'm Bartholomew Wolf-Twain. I was the 3rd Baron of Atenveldt, depending on whether Maury is being righteously indignant. He was Baron Atenveldt.
From 1966 to 1977,
So I'm
because
fourth.
nobody ever changed it.
Right.
He wasn't sitting as Baron, but.
Tried to quit, he wouldn't let.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm 4th, but I saw, coming home from church with my family, we were driving down Scottsdale Road, and I'd already been fanatical about medieval books and things. And we're driving by, and like the clouds part, the heavenly choirs come down, and there's these guys fighting in front of it's a railroad park on Scottsdale Road. And it was fantastic, and they wouldn't stop, so I begged my sister to take me to the next event. She got in before I did, because she wanted to make sure it was okay for little
Who
children.
was your sister?
Filronia Murimetsa.
Filronia is your sister.
Oh, yes, by the way, she says hi.
Oh,
She was here last week.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, she and Igor are my older son's godparents, which makes him my son's goduncle.
It's all terribly incestuous. So she got in, I got in from that, and then she went down to Tucson, which is to college, where she met her husband, and went from there.
Yeah.
But, I was here, grew up in Scottsdale. I remember a lot more than these folks do about that time, because I was 12 to 16, 17
I have a
in the
story about you when you
70s.
were 12.
And while they're all doing things and making pronouncements and just living their lives, here's this kid soaking it all in. I'm writing a book someday.
Permanently.
Anyway, when he was 12, he was showing, he and another friend were showing a tiny model of a trebuchet at the Firebird Festival of the Arts. And Lady Siobhan and I, in our work clothes, showed up, and we went up to the table, and for once we decided to have fun with it. And so we said, "Why do you people do this? You're anarchists?" The whole thing. And then, what was it, 20 years later, I was telling the story to someone, and you came right up and said, "That was you!"
I never said it in that voice.
That was you!
So, Lenore, when did you come into this whole mix? Because again, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Melinda's taken
I
a-
started in Iskather. And when I came in depends on whether you mean my first event or when I really became an
No,
active.
first event.
First event was also Dawn Bird's first event. Anybody remember Dawn Bird?
I remember.
Mary Margaret of Derby's daughter,
I
was
remember
born.
before Mary Margaret was married.
I don't remember quite that far, but Dawn Bird was 2 weeks old at the first event I went to, I think.
So you remember it for the baby?
My first two events, well, no, there's other reasons. My first two events, I get confused at my first event. But I think the feast was my first event.
So what year?
Yes,
73?
74?
70, they came down.
We brought histories. We can read, we can look up, we don't know.
No.
Anymore.
I
I have no
actually
idea.
started getting active and doing stuff in 76.
Now, if Woodford came down at the beginning of the school year, he wasn't there the first year I was there 72, 73 school year, and 73, 74, so it would have been like in 73.
That's about right.
Somewhere along.
We agree.
But
Rarely.
I started getting active in 76, and the reason I actually got to those first two events was because of Baldrick. Because before Baldrick was Baldrick, and Bouldervane, who is still around down in this.
And Jessica was steadfast.
And before Peanuts,
Steadfast because you
Jessica.
stuck with it.
Yeah. I dated Bald Stan before the SCA.
We're not talking about who's dated who.
He's the one that brought,
I will put that in the video.
into the society. No, he's the one that brought Chuck
And
I
that's wonderful.
into the
That
society.
whole part of it is gonna be in the shell in my book, so.
And I all got married like 6 months apart.
And his sister was in one of my classes in home ec, and she was making a gown. It was an independent study type design class.
And you were hooked.
I
And
was
it's
hooked.
that simple.
Mhm.
I'm gonna move to Melinda and tell us about your,
I found the essay
Awakening.
in Leprechaun,
Yes.
and Louisa Wood's home, and I stood around in costume for the better part of an hour, and I was making kilts for Brigadoon in high school. And she was like, oh, I can help you make those, and I had no idea how to make a kilt, and she seemed like a very nice lady. And so I went to a sewing workshop where she and Cynthia helped me.
It's called,
about a
Cynthia.
dozen
Cynthia,
kilts.
Ari, and Rudy.
At the Leprechaun, I had been wearing a mundane dress. I'd just driven a couple of people I worked with, they weren't even friends. I wasn't into science fiction. I really didn't want to be there, but I had a car and they offered me gas money and lunch if I would go. So I went. And I was watching two guys play chess after I talked to Louise. And they both had on these black silk cloaks. They looked very dashing and debonair. And I was on the chess team. So I figured, okay, I'll challenge one of them when they're done playing. And I stood up and went over there. And I had on this dress that I'd made that was at the time it was a very popular peasant style dress that I'd even hand dyed it myself. And they looked at me and thought I was one of the newcomers that had joined previously a few weeks earlier and was one of Louise's prior daughters. And Richard the Strange was one of them. And Richard enveloped me in the cloak and kissed me for all I was worth.
That's the only way he ever did that.
That's the only way he did things. And I was 17 and I had never been kissed.
Oh.
And then another
I'd like
fellow,
that anyway.
another fellow came around behind and started tickling me through the cloak. And I am hyper ticklish, maybe not so much now, but back then, I got hysterical. Louise came running out of the merchant room going, that's not one of my kids! And I was like, okay, you know, she seemed like a nice lady, but I'm not so sure about the rest of y'all.
I can
And I went
understand
to
that.
sewing workshops, and she kept calling me every week, come to fire practice, Melinda, come to fire practice. And I'm like, Louise, you're a nice lady, but. So I finally, she convinced me to come to one, and it was at the old school.
Mackin.
And they had a workshop earlier in the evening where they had taught about 20 young men how to kiss hands and pay compliments. And
Sweater school.
and I had no idea.
Where
what
we
was
taught
going on.
them not to drool.
Yes.
Or get obnoxious with it.
So Louise grabs me and she says, come here. And she holds me me over and stick your hand up. I am totally clueless. And these 20 young men, including Bartholomew, came along and kissed my hand and paid me compliments, and I had about 6 dates lined up by the end of the year. I was in.
Well, when you talk about the incestuousness here.
Yes.
what didn't
Now,
want to
now, now,
mention
now,
one
now.
other thing. Bartholomew's sister, which we talked about, she's the one who got my wife into the SCA, because she'd already been a member, and she was a undergraduate in the graduate Russian class
That I was
Tasha
teaching.
and mentioned the SCA.
And I had heard of the SCA, and I said, I'm joining, how?
Immediately followed by her joining the Associated Virgins of Atenveldt, which we'll have to talk about later.
Yes, but
Or
that.
perhaps not.
No. Belly dancing. There were 4 of us who started trying to teach ourselves belly dancing. And the 3 we've mentioned, Jessica, Veroni, and I, and Cassandra. And the people from Phoenix used to come down to Tucson back and forth. We'd always go back and forth to events. First event we were belly dancing at, he got a bit drunk. And tried, actually
He did win the inebriated.
biting the navel jewel out of Veronia's navel. She wound up scratching. But they
Learned a valuable lesson about life, right?
yeah, they've been friends since. I mean, she's
One of the things that we just.
godmother to my son.
One of the things that we distributed to you were some old things that I located that were originally in hard copy. There is, it says 1970 on it, but there are holes in it, and it says the Society for Creative Anachronism. It's obviously a little foldy thing, you know? And I got this thinking, this is old SCA. This is about what is the Society for Creative Anachronism. We used to hand these out at events, okay? But I wanted to have you look at the very bottom of what would be the first page for just a second. And forgive me, I'm going to read to you. A group in Phoenix was started in the fall of 1969 and was made a barony under the Kingdom of the West. It was made a principality in early 1970s, still dependent on the West. The Principality of, turn the page, Atenveldt, Phoenix, will become the Society's 4th kingdom in early 1971. It's actually, I think it was January of 71.
Yes.
And because by the time I went in March of 71, they were already on their second king. So I think that we actually had gone a little bit quicker than this originally published information had. But then it's, what is Atenveldt? What does it mean? I also distributed for you, and this is the oldest history of Atenveldt
And you know
in
what
existence.
Atenveldt means, do you?
Sun World.
No,
Well,
Sunland. In addition, the oldest history of Atenveldt is a sheet that says, and actually I punched the holes on the wrong side. It says, on the front it says in the beginning, and on the back it says Atenveldt. This is the oldest history of Atenveldt that I know of, that anybody ever published. It was originally done on one of the little typewriter things, and I got that and mimeographed copies in purple, okay?
Ditto.
This is ditto. This is an antique version of the history of Atenveldt, March 18th, whoops, where are we here? On the front it says, in the beginning, on September 7th, 1969, meeting to organize chapter of SCA held at Michael and Moria's house. By the way, he says hello, and Duke Arthur and Duchess Lorelei are visiting him at the moment in Houston. They're all sorry they couldn't be here. In attendance, Michael Moria, Richard Ironseed, and Anne of the Golden Rose, who would later become Anne Tannercourt? Is that
No,
that was
an
Maury's first wife.
Completely different.
So you have a collection of sort of the first events there in terms of what happened, but this is really an old version. I also distributed, because I thought it might be kind of fun, something to see if these old folks had any memories at all.
Not many.
This was originally a Founders Day reception youth quiz from 1994. And there are a variety of questions here. Are there any you know the answers to, or that we've already answered? Take a look at this. Did you have copies there? I got 2 extra copies.
There weren't a ton.
There weren't a ton? Anybody want one?
While she's passing out, we were saying,
I'm gonna
you know
steal
what
some of these.
what Atenveldt means. Does anybody know what Iskather means? Tir Iskather?
Isn't that like monkey extra one?
No.
Good.
Land of the tough.
Yeah.
Land of the tough. I was there that night that we dug through the Welsh dictionary and came up with it.
Well, there was, you have, what was it? Tuscan.
No.
No. I don't think we ever tried.
Yes, you did.
We did. I don't remember that.
One other old name, and I think Rick will remember this. Do you know where the name of our newsletter comes from? The South Wind.
The South Wind.
We used to hold events at the Para Club because we had a couple of Salt River Project workers. South of the Para Club was the stockyards. And the quality of our newsletter was very similar to the scent of the wind coming off of the stockyards. And that's why they named it that.
So, which of these questions, I'm sorry, go ahead.
A cute one is, why did they not name us, the Barons?
Oh, no, somebody on the board had proposed naming us the Waste.
The Waste.
The Wastes, and Moria objected because he didn't want to be known as Baron Waste.
Yeah.
Moria, Michael the Inebriate, later became Michael of Moria after they made him Baron and he thought it wasn't deep.
He was probably right.
He was Atenveldt's answer to Richelieu. He used to wear red robes and stand behind the king as seneschal and whisper in his ear.
Was a
Tell
good
him
thing,
what he
actually.
really ought to do. He was very good at it.
Yeah.
Things ran very smoothly with Moria.
For a
Honestly, he
number
was
of
kind of
years.
scary.
Yeah, he was.
Kind of scary.
He wrote songs about him, about
He
a
was
snake in the
Oh,
grass.
that was Joseph and Bobby from the Fat Prince of Atenveldt.
Yes.
He was surprised when I told him we were all terrified of him. He was kind of hurt, I think, actually, poor guy.
See, I wasn't, but I was old, because
Yeah.
these were, they were 17, 18,
Yeah.
19.
And you were a married
I was
lady.
the old married woman at 22 with a kid that,
Mom.
I was mom.
We did, go ahead.
I was going to say, Nikki used to walk around, and it was a different time and a different place, and it was safe.
Yeah.
And she, you know, it was, she was everywhere, and under everyone's foot at one time or another. And she would, people would have said, of course, say, "Where's your mother?" And she'd say, "I'll show you," and she would take them by the hand and drag grown men off to another side of the field and say, "This is Mom." And they would say, "Hi, Mom," and I became Mom to everyone. They had no idea what my name really was. They didn't
Just Mom.
As we look at these, and I don't know if you have things on here that look interesting that you might like to ask about or test memory. And that really is a memory test. There are a few things that got brought along. But there's parts of Seymour over here, the original banner from Casa Libre. There are some of the original weapons are back here we hope you'll take a look at. I wrote a few photos. There's a history of the kings and queens of Atenveldt that I did some years ago that actually has photos of ours. Some of the literature of our time, both what I would call more decorous music, for example, things that were serious that we sang, and then we had a rich history of that which was humorous and or vulgar. The SCA has been known for limericks. For years, and I brought a little bit of that too, and we could probably get some folks to participate if you were interested in that. But the other thing that I brought that I thought you might be interested in is many individuals have talked about Lawrence of Alan, Lord
Yes.
Lawrence of Alan.
Yes.
We give a tremendous amount of credit to. Lord Lawrence of Alan was a short, funny, charming, brilliant, dedicated individual who took photos of every single SCA event from 1969 through, what I know, 1984 in Atenveldt. And so we have a collection of photography of this era of the early stages of Atenveldt. It's sort of like the early and middle periods when we were expanding. Morgan Claymore was born in 1980 into the SCA, I have to tell you. Duke Morgan, My son, first time I saw that, I'm sorry. But my son was born into the SCA in 1980, and Larry was still taking pictures. If you get a chance to look at these photos, it's set up on a slideshow. I'm going to let it run continuously as long as the battery holds, and then we'll plug it in. But I'll let him run some tomorrow. If you get a chance, I'd love to have you share those. And also, we're going to make those as widely available again as we can, because Larry gave us, both my sister-in-law and I, and my husband, the rights. And his family has done the same thing, given us the rights to be able to display these, because he wanted them shared.
As long as they're only used for personal use and not for profit.
No money. He never asked anything for them. In those days, he took every slide and paid for everything himself.
Yep.
We have the original slides, and we'll continue to cull through them, because this is a tiny portion of all that he took. So I have to give credit to Larry for having that, and I know these folks will all listen to.
Indeed.
To Lawrence.
Can I toss a little bit of old Atenveldt history out?
Yeah, if you don't make me cry.
I won't, I promise. Actually, I don't promise. The first fighting household in the SCA was Casa Negra. It was literally a fighting household. However, if you want to go back into history to December of 1972, we hadn't been a kingdom that long. Stand up, Kim. December of 1972 was the coronation of Arthur and Lorelei. It was also the first appearance of that symbol on the field of Atenveldt. The brothers Crusadine were born at the coronation and the following day in Warlord, 1972. Been around for a little while.
And
Still
thinking
kicking.
of fighters and weapons.
Oh, yeah.
There are some weapons here that are very definitely illegal.
Now.
Yes.
Now. Morning star.
And this is the flail that made the marshals of the SCA ban flails.
No.
Oh, now don't argue the two of you.
Oh, I will.
Because there is the two-handed
The flail that he's talking about had an almost 6-foot haft on it, and that much heavy. I know, because you hit me with it at El Dorado Park.
There was a gentleman at El Dorado Park, Stephen Blackie,
Yes.
that wore.
Third king of Atenveldt.
Who
Oh,
wore
sorry.
a,
Black Eagle of the West.
yeah, who wore scale mail. And it hung off of his body, and he had a big chest and narrow waist. And it didn't, you could hit him with a regular sword, and he didn't even feel it.
Literally, because of the way the mail hung.
His armor worked correctly.
But when you hit him with the flails, it almost picked him up and moved him off the bridge.
He's about 6'5".
He had a
And
great stormtrooper in CHX 738.
He did, but I also talked to him last week, and he said he's sorry he can't be here, but he's got something going on with one of his granddaughters.
That's so sweet.
We could have an entire different panel that would be a lot of fun sometime, of really cool weapons that you can't use anymore.
Does that tie into,
Red blunt-tip arrows.
does it,
We have a
does
question.
it tie into this story about why cups became popular?
Who wants to tell the story about white?
There was a tournament. Yeah, Richard, you were the marshal. But I believe Chuck and somebody else hit Mont Royal at the same time, and Duke Richard was moving.
Yeah.
They both caught him below the waist. He took out his cup in 2 pieces.
Oh.
But he was okay. And that made a lasting impression.
since that day, we've all religiously worn our
We have another question, please.
For many of my SCA generation, our first substantial loss of somebody in the SCA, not necessarily on a personal level, but on an SCA level, was Larry.
Yeah.
We don't want to forget that name. What name comes to your mind for the first of your?
Petrushka.
The first one?
Dale
Edward
Small.
Schleicher
Edward Schleicher.
Sir Edward Schleicher.
Yeah.
He was the first.
Who was
Uncle
knighted
Teddy.
at our first event.
He was knighted at our first event. A Celtic, he was really the head of one of the heads of the clan, chief of the clan, which was a rotating chieftain, whoever didn't run fast enough. And married to Aunt Cherie of the Gardens, for whom I am named. And his loss was great, and he died in 1975 in a car accident.
He was only, what, 27, something like that?
And as a matter of fact, Cherie was here 2 weeks ago. She's sorry. This is it's her granddaughter's second birthday, so she's in California.
Yeah.
But this is one of those situations where that kind of loss is very large. The SCA is in many ways a family.
Oh, yeah.
You're right, it is, because we feel those losses intensely when those who are part of what we have done are no longer with us. And we hold them dear still, and that's a very
Members were bagpipers in rock bands.
Only Teddy that I know of.
in 1970s.
Gave
Midnight
voice
Special.
to the type of music that was bagpipe and tuba when it was presented.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
That was
yes.
Teddy and Richard Strange.
Karen?
Yes, sir.
There's somebody whose name
First
I haven't mentioned yet that was really, 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 really important to early, Joe Bethencourt. Thomas and Loxley.
Thank you.
You know, you talk about the great houses. Loxley was one of the great houses of Atenveldt. My first introduction to the SCA came from my friend Joe saying, hey, there's this new thing you'd really like to play. And my girlfriend at the time said, you're doing 3 shows right now, you don't have time for that. We broke up, I was living in Weldon House 2 months later. Partying, having fun.
And he's also one of the people that got me involved with this guy that I've been married to for 40 years. He was a herald of the kingdom, and I was a herald down in Iskather. Respected his opinion, and he said, you've got a good one, stick with him, so I have.
How many of you have your arms are because of Joe?
Well, when you
Yours.
put them through.
When you put them-
He helped me design it and put it through.
He designed mine, he designed
He
mine.
introduced me to heraldry. It's been
Yes.
my little hobby for years, but I've never held it on.
Please.
Wasn't he your troubadour, the first troubadour of the kingdom?
Oh, yeah.
Actually,
He
there were
was the
two.
white, he was the
Yeah.
white
One was
star.
Richard the Strange,
Yeah.
and one was Joseph of Loxley.
But Richard was a member of Loxley.
He was.
Yes.
Well, there were a lot of people who were members of Lux.
Yeah.
True.
The two were very much brothers, though. As,
Yeah.
I would say as much as Richard and Gloria. They were very close.
Yeah.
And then there was Funny Fellows.
Another hotbed of SCA activity.
Yes.
Where did you do the business? Oh, in this bar while we were listening to him sing country. I'm sorry, bluegrass.
Folk music.
Appalachian.
The
What
only
was the
place-
first night?
Of the Kingdom of Atenveldt?
Yes.
Of the kingdom or in Atenveldt?
Ignited as a Kingdom of Atenveldt
Yes.
or a night before it became the Kingdom of Atenveldt?
No, the first night of Atenveldt.
Well, now that's an interesting story because first of all, no, wait. First of all, you have not only that confusion, but also
Masters of
because Master Richard the Short, for whom masterhood was created in the SCA, said he could not swear fealty to anybody but God, so they created masterhood for him. I oversimplified it a little
Yes,
bit. And he was instrumental in shaping some of the early fighters of Atenveldt. So when knighthood was offered to some of the early fighters of Atenveldt, they said, I can't swear fealty, and they were offered masterhood. So who was first?
Arthur?
Knight or master?
Let's talk about first belted fighter.
Chivalry.
Round Pounder, wasn't it? Well, Round Pounder was belted in the west.
In the West, as a
And so
master
was Arthur,
initially.
and so was Ivan.
And so was Ivan.
It was Ivan,
Right.
Ivan was the first.
Yeah, Ivan was.
Do you see what you've opened here?
And you see, but then because they were masters, then some of them then took knighthood, then they went back. So there's this shifting of what belted fight. So there's this shifting of dates in terms of the kingdom. What this says is that by the time Dennis and I came in, this gentleman was already a knight, right? Okay? On the field, and there were others, including Master Arthur of Lockhaven and Master Ivan Dugray. And our understanding is, we have to ask them, who came first?
Because I remember my first Estrella was Estrella 1. I was introduced to a gentleman, Richard McGrath.
That's true, he was.
Also known as the Black Knight of Atenveldt.
Yeah.
He was Premier Chevalier
For a long time, and he may have been the first knight.
I think he was the first
He
knight.
could well have been.
Yes.
You know what, I brought everything else on the list in blue green, but I didn't bring that. But I'll find out.
One of the things that was confusing about calling people premier is that if people became inactive, the person who was kind of the oldest one at the time
Yes.
became premier, so it was a little
Acting.
confusing because it didn't necessarily mean they were first. It meant
They were the
first
oldest
there.
yes.
So that
kind of was.
This says October 10th, 1970, first two-day tournament, McCormick Park. Robert Roundpounder won the lists as the next prince. His princess would be Kathleen, the Pure Delight. Kathleen McLarains has sat the throne for years and years, more than any other individual in the Kingdom of Atenveldt.
Not always we can say it.
I was going to say.
Or baron, or prince. She sat the thrones of Atenveldt more than any other individual until Anna. But it also says Carola Grimm was knighted on October the 11th, 1970. And Robert and Kathleen McLarain were crowned. It was her first event.
But that was not Kingdom of Atenveldt.
No, it's principality, second
Right. So
principality.
that's right. So you still have it. Please.
Who was the first prince of the principality?
Robert Roundpounder.
Robert Roundpounder, and he was prince with, oh, I don't know her name.
Katrine.
It was Katrine.
Ivan.
Chuck's sister.
Their sister,
Chuck and-
Ivan.
Charles of the Jacks and Arthur of Lockhaven are brothers, and their baby sister, Katrine, was the first princess. Second princess was Angela of the Meadows. She'll be here tomorrow.
Oh, good.
She reigned with Arthur of Lockhaven, and the third princess was Kathleen McLarain, and I hope that she and Ivan de Grey will join us tomorrow.
Ivan of Navarrete.
Yes, Ivan of Navarrete originally. Yes.
You know what Atenveldt means. What I want to know is, who named it?
A bunch of us that sitting around at night coming up with the names.
You want to be doing it,
And
cheering.
what could have been our other choices?
So says the kid.
Let's just point out, at this point, this would be a good one, I don't know if it's on your, what else was the barony of Atenveldt called for a short
I
period
know.
of time?
I believe it's the Red Centaur?
Kentaurus.
Kentaurus.
Yeah.
And that's what we did for a while, offer an order of the Red Centaur.
So you do all the orders.
Which no longer appears in any of the kingdom lists.
Any of you.
Very short time when we were, I guess, Vicarage between, because we were the first ones when the barony became a barony under the Kingdom of Atenveldt by
Active
itself.
barony, yeah.
And I think it was because we were apolitical, so nobody was pissed off at us. So, well,
Yes,
there
yes.
was-
The barons were appointed
It was a-
by the crown.
By the crown at
You
that
didn't
point.
say no.
And we didn't say no.
When Atenveldt grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, the Phoenix metro area had been the Principality of the Sun. And then it got bigger and bigger, and the principality grew and grew and grew. We became a kingdom, and then we had all these other regions and principalities and kingdoms, and we said, what is this? What is this place? We're the barony. So we started calling ourselves the Barony of Atenveldt again because that worked. But then, what is the geographic area of Arizona? So we decided that we would call it the Principality of the Sun. And the board wasn't happy, and they took us to task because we didn't ask anybody. We just but the truth is, ultimately, they
That's an
had to
Atenveldt
say,
tradition.
well, yes, actually, that does make sense, and made it retroactive, though there was a hoop-de-doo over it, and I think you had to deal with that as the first prince of the reconstituted Principality of the, do I have this
I was
memory?
third.
Oh, third?
But
So it's still
No,
going
Ivan
on,
was
Okay, it was
three.
because the Ivan and Kathleen were,
I just had a good
Kathleen
relationship with the
McLarain.
board. That's all.
If I could interject,
I don't remember whether you wrote it or something, somewhere down the line I saw the question about what makes Atenveldt different from other towns. And I really thought, and what I came up with was, we didn't ask anybody's permission for much of anything.
No.
There was a
We didn't
reason
know
for
what we were
that.
doing. We made it up as we went along, but we made it up passionately, and we stood for it, and we fought for it, and we got our way like spoiled, petulant children.
Yes.
But if we had to pick a theme song from the mundane world, I think it would have to be I Did It My Way.
And usually it was his way.
No, it's usually Moria's.
But they left us a legacy because we continued with that
I
attitude
also have
this
to
day.
interject something on names. What was it you said you kept finding me listed as?
Fuzzy. Her
In
name's
all of the
Fuzzy.
histories and stuff, I'm fuzzy if you come across it.
There's a couple of questions.
I do, please.
Since we're built on our research and discovery, during your time period, what was the greatest discovery that you guys were able to bring back?
You mean historical discovery, is that what you're asking?
For like personas, is that what you mean?
Just in a recent.
Trebuchets!
Real books of heraldry.
Yeah.
Right.
Sir Winford of Lorient, who made the second suit of armor, full plate,
Yeah.
and was an early, very prolific and good armorer.
Pavilions, trebuchets.
He's an engineer. He,
Food.
early days, no one knew how to put two pieces of plate armor together and make them work together because no one had ever done that modernly. He tried all sorts of things, and we were talking, Dennis and I, a little earlier, that it would be really cool if Cook could,
Ivan the Great.
could bring it. There was one where we had pins and slots for the knees. Looked beautiful, worked beautiful until somebody hit it, and then it worked not at all. But there were all sorts of these things, and he took a trip with this lady to England and got a chance to go into the Tower of London and actually talk to people and look at the backs of armor, because there was no book that we could find that actually showed the back of armor. And that radically changed armoring, I don't know just in Atenveldt, but certainly.
I think his influence was.
Yeah, kind of like.
Now, a lot of us, I wanted to point out when you bring this up, when I went around to build Seymour, I had a book of how you made armor for plays to be on the stage. So that wasn't really armor that was designed to be beat upon.
Thanks.
So it took a lot of work and rework to finally get a suit of armor.
Though we did spend a lot of time, there was a lot of time out in the front yard of Weldon House pitching cans of refried beans at the church across the street.
With a trebuchet.
The minister loved it, by the way.
I think theater is one of the unique things about the SCA and why it kept us from being so historically accurate all the time is because I think theater was a big influence. It was drama, it was things, it was like looking, you were learning costuming, not how to make medieval clothing. And so I think that's been kind of a paradigm shift in our organization.
Okay,
founded by theater majors.
Yeah, a lot of us were.
So that,
No.
were you a theater major?
Oh,
Well, there was
I mean,
a lot of writers,
science fiction
writers,
science fiction, and also ex-military.
But you'll find that a lot of us that
We have
are
a
older
question
aren't
for
as, we want things to look medieval, we want things to have a certain feel to it, but very few of us are the ones that are where that scene checker thing came from, or where that kind of
Costume Nazis
neurotic
were not.
clothing worry came was much later, because we were like, we kind of wanted that another friend called it drive-by medieval, where it just wasn't distracting, it didn't take you out of the moment, and that was the most important thing.
More to
We had
the
a question that we
point,
missed.
nobody had any money to do what they do.
Still, we don't have anybody. Please.
With your
Still don't have
yellow
one.
sheet over here, really intrigued me. Who is Auntie Shushu?
That's Sheree of the Gardens, the lady, the clan Lorraine, and Shushu is Auntie Little Cabbage. And she was anti-shoo-shoo because she was Aunt Cherie. She was anti-shoo-shoo to almost everybody. We got another question, then we're gonna do two up here.
I've heard a lot over the years about armor and how they developed armor and it went from this to this to that. But what about the weapons? Did it always start from rattan? Was that
By the time we got into it, yes. At the first tournament over in the West, they didn't. Rattan, they were looking around for material after that and they found rattan. And it turned out to be a success, and enough of a success, and flexible enough that we stuck with it. But so it basically, as long as Atenveldt has been in existence, it's been rattan.
However,
If I could kick in a little, go ahead.
for demo fighting, occasionally, particularly Charles and Arthur, who had good armor, they would fight with real steel.
I went up against that wearing scale.
The SCA experimented with it.
In the earliest days,
we'd spin
oak, ash, and hickory.
Right, that's what.
But they found it splintered badly. Edward Bearsark, our first SCA marshal, told me about a guy who brought an axe to an event. He made it out of 3/4 inch plywood. So Edwin took it to the side of the field, cut down a sapling with it, and said, no. Rattan worked out to be the safest thing possible, and it's historically accurate as far as a training substitute.
Fuzzy, you had something else you were gonna say?
I was gonna say, talking about research and stuff, it's real hard to be historically accurate on clothing when what you have are pictures of pictures. And the pictures you have are about this big. And the only way you can make them any bigger is to use a magnifying glass. Because there's no internet, there's no Zoom, there's no, you know, and if you look at some of the pictures and some of what came out as scarf in the early days, it's actually pretty damn amazing.
Especially Louise, I would say Louise.
Yeah.
Well, let me say, Louise of Woods Home was in many ways, she was a professional costumer. Let's start with that she already had some professional experience. And went from here to Caid and now lives in Pennsylvania, okay? She's still making costumes, extensive costumes. And it's absolutely, I'm sorry, thank you. But it's absolutely amazing costumer. And in many ways, she did Atenveldt's first Elizabethan. She did metal work for everybody, including my Pelican. She was an amazing costumer, but she also got other people involved in saying, you know, we could make this more realistic.
I still have some old portfolios of hers, portfolio of fashions.
Oh my.
I have to pull them out, but she did.
Well, the ones because I pulled out a while back our wedding pictures, the few we've got. And we got married almost 34 years ago in Henrician Tudor. And I look at those pictures and you know what? They still look damn good.
I mean, we may have all been using things like satin and things. I mean, there were little bits and pieces that were probably wrong, but we did it surprisingly well. I would say.
You know, getting the look.
Yeah, getting the look.
For what we know.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
God!
Another question down there.
There's a bar here somewhere.
Well, since you were talking about the metal, doing the medallions, I know, I've heard a lot about armor makers, but when did metal smiths start coming in? Like, how far does Kirby go back? People like that.
Kirby goes back before we were Kingdom.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you had.
And I had a forge, and we brought it to some of those early demos down at the Firebird Festival of the Arts.
Hallowed memory.
So metalsmithing goes right back to the roots as well.
Yes, early Order of Lights. Was it you who made the first one?
Yeah.
The copper.
Yeah, it was a copper disc that he used a nail to.
No.
He used a Florentining tool.
Which he had just gotten it.
There it is, very first one.
Yeah.
This is the first order of line of Atenveldt, right there.
It looks like fingerprints from the day. I'll have to go back later. He'll let me polish it.
Other questions, things that we didn't answer, please.
Was there, because, I mean, as I've seen over the 25 years, there's been transitions of where is Atenveldt going to continue? Was there a point in the beginning where you were all like, hey, this was fun, but now we need to go on and do our real life? I mean, was there a point where the Atenveldt just almost was no more?
Everybody always needed to do their real lives.
Yeah, but I meant, was there a point where it was just like,
There was a point where many of the older among us, including me and my husband Joseph, Count Joseph the Good, didn't play very often because we were very busy with school. He'd started law school, we had babies, that sort of thing. And it happened with all of us. There were still people who were
Today and then is that the SCA-wide is having some, it's not just this kingdom, is having some difficulty because people are gaming and they can do this in their own living rooms and they don't have to get dressed up and go to the work. And this is work. I mean, it's a lot of fun and it needs to be fun, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And that, I think, has contributed to a change in the SCA in an underlying way that in our areas we didn't see because there were always newcomers coming up who said, oh my goodness, I can do this and I can become and I can experiment and explore and I can have fun and there are women and there are men. I joined the SCA to make men. It worked. It worked. I never pretended that it was anything else. But I
oh God.
But the truth of the matter is I think today the SCA faces a different kind of challenge. And that is, why should somebody sit in their living room and pretend in their head that they're going to become somebody when they could come out here and do it for real? As real as we can get. And I think that change is probably one of the most significant contributions that the SCA can continue to make. Is you can come out and you can get your muscles in motion and you can get your brain in. There aren't any stupid people in the SCA either. That's because of the people. Dumb people, they don't have the ability. Because dumb people think it's just stupid. They walk away because they go, no, it doesn't make any sense to them. But people in the SCA tend to be brighter, better educated, and also more involved in life in lots of different ways. One of the risks that the SCA faces today is that it demands full-time commitment, and nobody can do that. We have to be able to make livings. We have to be able to have fun in our lives. We have to have families and friends and do other things. That full-time commitment is a risk. So when people say, I'm going to take some time, I'm going to go do this, don't mug them. Say, that's wonderful, we'll look forward to seeing you later. Because it's really important for people not to just devote their lives to the SCA, but to have other things in their lives in which they feel positive, that they feel that they can make commitments in, that they can do and do well. Whatever that is, however small that is, whether it's work or raising their children or whatever, because dragging kids around to the SCA all the time isn't necessarily good for the kids all the time. You know, there's lots of things that kids can learn. We all raised our kids in the SCA. We know what it can do. My son today is moved away on account of he said, I've got this opportunity professionally. He knows that that comes first. And that's a value that I think we can continue to pass on. Please. I'm sorry, I got off soapbox.
Metal on your head.
Yep. Cornet.
The cornet.
Created by Duke.
First came into
Reynard Foxman.
SCA, heard about armature cornet, armature circlets. Couldn't wear them in this realm.
No,
so, like,
still can't. You still can't.
Yeah, I know.
originally barons wore, when we even were allowed to wear, barons
So why,
were given
yes,
circlets.
so for a lot of people here,
This was our original circlets.
Yeah.
say, why,
Princess.
why does the rule happen here for this?
Because that was that was how we knew, was that tiny little circlet was worn by our highest ranking people.
So what's the first coronet, county coronet you ever got? This one?
Yeah, I think so. And this is fairly recent.
And this was given to us
by Joseph.
Yeah.
But that was why. And that's, and it's why people are so sensitive about it. That is something that's been a really sensitive topic for our
Oh
kingdom.
boy, is it ever.
About a decade years ago, it went. That's very unique to this kingdom because other kingdoms are like, why do you guys care? And you're like,
Exactly.
it was such a big part of our hearts. that was, I think to a lot of us, well, I can certainly say to me
Some
growing
parts,
up.
yeah.
To those of us growing up in it at least, or maybe coming later, to something that was already established. Because to me, the royalty was, and everybody got their turn, so that's another thing that was a little different. And
Yeah.
probably
And that was the
versus
intent in
now.
the West.
But it was something to be lauded and respected, and it was the one thing that we did differently than other clubs anywhere, and it's one of the things that we do differently than clubs now, is we have something that's so representative of the Middle Ages and that part of the history. And so I know that for a lot of us, it was like, just don't step on it, was our only thing. If you have any respect at all, please have respect for this one
little
piece,
thing.
this one little piece.
Melinda?
Louisa Woodson explained it to me thus. He said, it's like a chess game. And if all the pieces look the same, how can you tell who's playing what kind of game?
Right.
Let me
Questions, please,
point
Costa.
out that the ban is not uniformly popular. And some of us, and I'm going to include myself in this, some of us feel it's excessive.
Same here.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Costa?
I have a question, maybe this is just a little bit selfish because it's part of the history of the line I was fortunate enough to be in. Thank you. I've always, we take ourselves so serious now, and I've heard legends of something called the Monsters that used to do some ridiculous tournaments.
Monsters, dwarves.
Yeah, dwarves. I'd love to hear about the monsters and the dwarves if you all have a minute to tell me.
Dennis, you got it.
Yeah.
The Monsters started in Loxley Hall. We were originally the Loxley Monsters. I joined, I started fighting, I became the master of the Monsters. And when I was king, came down from the throne, started Monster Hall, and Joe said, here it's yours. Which is why we now have the Monsters of Monster Hall, registered badges, the works. Monsters, either over 6 feet or over 200 pounds. There is one combo monster, Mad Dog and Fang. They made 200 pounds between them. And you didn't want to mess with them. The dwarves started in the outlets.
Okay, I can tell the dwarf story, but no shit, there I was.
There you were.
Heinrich de Jager and Gustav der Ostermark, two of the founders of the outlets,
I hope.
were taking a class in anthropology, and they had to design a culture. And of course, they couldn't use the SCA because their teacher was wise to the SCA. So they came over to Theo's to smoke a bowl and contemplate this matter deeply.
Here's what it was.
Theo's son, Daniel Michaelwood, was 3 or 4 years old, and he was watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on TV. And so they sat there and contemplated that and said, let's form a culture around Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so they did. And so, but they looked at themselves and said, well, we're clearly not dwarves. They were all over 7 foot.
Yeah, all over
6 foot, 200 pounds. And so they decided they were the lost tribe of dwarves. And we had many a battle where the dwarves met the monsters and fought over cookies.
Yes. I remember that.
Which could get rough because some of the dwarves were monsters and some of the monsters were dwarves.
Yes, there was some overlap there. And
One of the kings of Atenveldt, Theo, my Trinewood, was also a dwarf.
Yes.
And I brought along a picture of him. He's telling the picture of Goldilocks and the 3 dwarfs to an infant Morgan. To an infant Joel. The 3 dwarfs. Yeah, these many years ago.
Wasn't Searcher Ronson, or Searcher Rons, wasn't he a monster?
Yes.
Yes.
There's a monster.
And but thinking of fighting over cookies, when we did tournaments in the early days, one-on-one battles.
Yes.
Besides, are you ready and everything, it's what are you fighting for?
Cookies.
And sometimes it was cookies, sometimes it was the halibut, the fish, just because they couldn't think of something else. But we came up with some really creative things there, fun challenges.
You want to tell a couple of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
The challenge.
We used to fight, you guys, you wimps, don't do this anymore. Before any tournament, we'd go out and fight one-on-one challenges. Lots of them.
Grudge matches
I
were
would love to have
really
the first
approved.
challenge of the day, and I would challenge Charles and the Jacks. Why? Jacks are better open.
Also, one of the things that Deaton and Dennis did early, during this era where they were both kind of finaling in crowns for a while, was that they would go out and they would fight each other, but they set these things up. There was this stick of French bread.
Okay.
That they teased. Yeah, please. But then we got to tell about
1975,
Tommy.
October. I'm fighting in Crown List, and I'm the marshal in charge of Crown List. This is the fun. We get to the finals, it's me and Deaton. Well, we had already prepared for this eventuality. Took a short sword, taped a French breadstick to it, so it just looked like a broadsword. And then, prior to the finals of Crown List, got into an argument on the field, you know, and he comes at me with this stick, and we're not wearing armor. Take it away from me, break it two, and start eating it. He and I are the only ones who know it's not rattan. It certainly, shall we say, made the mood a little more jovial for us to go into the finals.
Can I?
Please,
Oh.
please.
Talking about doing things for fun reasons. We used to have a monthly war that would drown everyone in Atenveldt at this point, because it was held directly under the bridges of Tempe Town Lake.
There you go. There's a picture of Nikki and Lynn there together.
And at the beginning of we used to fight in the riverbed because nobody cared if we hurt something. And I recognize, of course, the traditional ranchero, yeah, very cool. And
is that our ranchero?
Yes.
He's driving it up the
Yeah, he just got that from
but the way that we would, you know, we had to have a reason to have those wars. You know, we divided up into two groups, and some generally willing lady would be kidnapped by one side. And sometimes those events, the only person that would come out of that with actual harm would be that poor lady who would be tossed over her shoulder and jogged off.
Job of Braveheart Thorns, right beside, yeah.
Well, that's how.
On my stomach to try and explain to my mother what was going on in the SCA. Like, oh, Mom, they just kidnapped me, threw me over her shoulder, and ran up the hill. Oh, yeah.
That's how Lorelei was introduced to Arthur, I guess.
It was.
He threw her over his shoulder and carried her off the battlefield. And then she decided, well, that was fun.
It happened to a lot of us.
Yeah.
But of course, they asked permission first.
No, they didn't.
With Lorelei, they did.
Please, we've got others.
So whose idea was it originally for Australia War?
Okay.
It goes back before Australia.
Caid calls the border wars.
It goes back before Australia.
Yeah.
It goes back before Burrow Creek.
It goes back before
Invitational, but there was nothing else scheduled after that.
Yeah, the next year was Burrow Creek.
Now, the next year, nothing was on the calendar.
No.
I won Coronet, went to visit West Kingdom, needed to talk with the board, and was staying with Paula Bellatrix. He's a good friend. And he was bored and not happy and said, you know, if you put on another war and didn't hold it in Phoenix, I could get our Knights to go. But they don't want to do it if you guys don't have to travel. I grew up playing in Burrow Creek Canyon. It's halfway between Phoenix and Kingman, where my grandmother lived. Mike Cook helped me find the Bureau of Ranch Management guy.
Ivan DeGray had arranged the first Caid Invitational at Estrella Park, which is really the very first one. Then he helped Dennis.
And basically, I invited, our first one was Caid and Atenveldt, the Caid Invitational. The second one, invitations went out to every kingdom in the SCA. We had, in fact, Burrow Creek won. Only war ever held where there were more combatants than there were observers. We had more fighters than we had people watching us fight.
Yep.
Only time that ever happened.
I did the first three, and then Carrie took over with Bartholomew and Woodford did the next couple up there.
Yeah.
Then we did two at Great Desert. And then moved to another old childhood playground, Estrella Mountain Park.
I know, we could go on like this all day, but we don't intend to bore you. And we realize it's nearly noon. I'm not sure from our organizers exactly what we're going to be doing next, or if y'all want to continue, or I don't know when this session
Court's at 12:30.
Court's at 12:30. So this is entirely up to you whether you want us to wind this up or keep going.
I got plenty of camera.
We still have half an hour.
We're good.
Okay,
Keep
thank
going.
you. Please, did you have a question? Yes.
Just as there are different avenues of thought about the small court, the small doodads for armatures, there are different avenues of thought for how people describe what we do in the SCA. Myself, I honestly say I play when somebody asks me how long you've been in the SCAs, I've been playing for XYZ years, okay? There are other avenues of thought who take it much more seriously. They refuse to call it a game. And they, it's all of this sort of vernacular. And I was wondering, inside your own heads, when you think of the SCA, do you think of it as a game? That it's something that you consider 99% enjoyable, that it's a game? Or do you personally, and I'm putting my opinion into this statement, do you personally think of the SCA as something so much more important than a game?
Games are games.
The more complex the mind, the greater the need for simple play.
Ladies.
I understand that.
Okay, Lynn, and Nora, Fuzzy. I'm sorry, Lenore.
For myself only, I would answer thusly. When I joined the SCA, I think by and large we were lonely, misfit kids. We had 1,000,001 things that were commonalities. Many of us had at least one parent who was an alcoholic. Overall, extremely high IQs. Which doesn't always necessarily mean a successful education. It can, it doesn't always, for sure. And we found a group of people that we felt to be a part of. Oh, they're like me. One of the things that was most common was the pun. Oh my goodness, puns everywhere. We played mental games. I remember going to parties where we played not Trivial Pursuit, we played trivia with somebody coming up with a question that the idea was to stump everybody. And it was John Beresford Tipton that signed the check in The Old Millionaire, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So I know, because you are us.
Yes.
But the point is that when you look at that person, whether it's me or whether it was one of my friends, you're looking at someone that discovered a place where they fit. And that brings joy, laughter, camaraderie, games, absolutely. If you leave out the game, I think you lose the biggest gift that the SCA has to give you. If you forget how to laugh,
Sorry, sweetheart.
you've lost it.
And laugh at yourself.
Laugh at yourself, and yes, we can laugh at each other, but it's with a great deal of love. And even our bad guys, I can call them a bad guy, but you better not, because they're mine, just like your brother or your sister or your cousin or whatever. And those things were important to our well-being and our success as people outside the SCA. Important? You bet. I can't even imagine where I would have been without the SCA. Did I learn valuable skills? Hey, I was the one that I liked to throw the party. I never answered that question. I liked to autocrat. I threw the party. I liked to hear people laugh. Boy, those organizational skills I've used over and over and over again in 1,000 different ways. We couldn't play without learning something. We had to go to the library. There wasn't an internet. And when you went to the library, you argued about who had the one and only book called The Viking that had that history in it. And it was, Billy got it again. Darn it.
Dan.
Billy.
Billy.
That's
Game or not,
family.
yeah, so the answer's both for me.
The answer's both.
Eleanor.
For me, in many senses, it's also what Lynn said. But because my closer SCA friends are still family, I see them frequently. These are the people I grew up with. The guy I met at that first tournament I was married to for 35 years. So, yeah. But I see it still more as a game and a club. Now, it's a club I've learned enormous amounts of things from. So I was 17. I had my first article for publication published. I learned to write for a publication in the SCA, and that stood me in good stead.
We learned
later on.
skills.
I learned lots of skills. And, yeah, but I see it more as a club and a game that is very.
One more.
Were people who didn't fit in elsewhere. I came in, I was 26 when I really started playing. And I do consider it playing. It is basic, it's not real life, folks.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. I've been in and out because of real life. And it's something that is important to me. It has been, since he's gone, I can say this, super important to Rick, to the point where he put so much of himself into it that he had to take a break.
We've all lived in it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And there are immense personal reasons for the game. And there is immense personal growth, but my personal growth may not be yours.
Michelle.
I was actually, maybe, and again, growing up in it, there's a different perspective. I didn't come across it, I didn't come into it, I didn't find it the way other people did. So it was just a part of my experience, but it has always, always, always been a hobby. It has always been outside of life. School came first, work came first, your blood relatives came first. But I mean, it was the thing about a hobby, you know, when you become so large that it can become its own hobby. But I asked the same question actually with the organization and watch it become more intense. But there are things that give me some. But then I watch these shows. I watch reality shows where people are in a VW club, or they're updating stereos, or they're in art communities, and it's just as intense and just as serious as anything that anybody else does. So I don't really feel a lot of shame about how much of my life it's probably consumed either. And I look at the fact that that hobby that line starts to blur, that we have an organization that's big enough that people have based their entire careers and make their entire living from the organization. And so how do you say it's not real life to someone like that? That's how they pay for their mortgage and their family.
This has all brought up lots of, we have 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
I was going to interject, I fit somewhere between noob and relic, but my answer to that, I thought a lot about, because I get asked it all the time, because I talk about it at work and in the grocery store and in the library and walking down the street to strangers. And to me, it's an excuse. It's an excuse to get to play with swords and look cool doing it, without worrying about getting arrested.
Very important.
That was mine, was to get to play with swords.
And that, my view of the SCA was unofficial, like we are a subculture, because as we have kings and queens burying kings and queens, which I think is fantastic. And it's just like, wow, our first royal family, that is so cool.
It's more than Bellatrix is reversed.
Well, first in our realm.
You know what, we actually might have been the first ones to have the kids reign. I don't really know.
They're the first one that I knew of.
Think about
The
this
thing is,
point. The largest standing army in the world not associated with a government.
Exactly, here too. And say, if this was a game, I'd say, well, what is the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl is but a game. But look how many millions of dollars just for one flipping commercial. Yes.
It's just a game.
But this is.
We have better commercials, we have better songs.
We also have better
looking women always have.
Please, we have another comment.
I want to say that my father grew up on a farm and in a farming community, and in that community, everybody knew everybody else. They did sewing bees together. They had lots of potlucks and lots of times when they went and helped somebody else who was down on their luck, or they had a tornado or something. And when he joined the military and started being moved all over the place, he lost that community. And they had, you know, an officers club and stuff, and when he got out of the Air Force, or actually when they moved to Arizona, he joined a country club. And he found that community again, and he taught me how important it is to have lots of friends that you can do things with. But it cost them $15,000 to join a country club. It cost them $165 a month to belong to that country club. Plus they had to rent their carts, and you know how expensive everything is at a country club. And when I joined the SCA and tried to explain to him what I was doing, I said, this gives me the kind of community that you grew up with, and it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg. And it seemed just kind of flippant to say that when I was young, but as time has gone by, it has become more and more true.
It's interesting how the SCA also is so popular within the military.
Yes.
Because it is one of the things that we have heard many, many stories about individuals who joined the SCA in the military, and then as they moved from place to place and got stationed somewhere else, they took that with them, and it remained part of the community too. I think that's an interesting sort of
Well,
offshoot.
how we grew into Europe.
Yeah.
How we grew into Europe.
The colonies, yes.
American servicemen have been part of the SCA.
Same with Japan.
Started over there, and now they've left, and native Europeans are now staffing Drachenwald, and we've got a very active group over there.
And Japan.
And Japan.
And Thailand.
And Thailand.
That when I went to visit Europe at one point, and I was at a castle in Scotland, and there was an event going on, and not an SCA event, but it so looked like it.
Yeah.
And my son and I walked up, Joel and I are traveling, Morgan and I are traveling together, and we walked up in this castle, and I said, I'm gonna go find out what this is about, because they're getting ready to fight a battle. And so I walked up to the oldest guy I could see that had the most gunk around his neck, okay? The most stuff. And I said, excuse me, my lord, and he said, Viking guy, okay? And I said, excuse me, I am Duchess Kershri of the Fallen Stars of the Society for Creative Anachronism in the United States of America. What are you doing? And he said, oh, you're the SCA! They knew about us, they were a recreationist organization, they recreate battles, and they wanted to know about what we had done because we were the first. They wanted to know how we did it. And I thought, oh my goodness, isn't that amazing?
Oh, I've got one story I've got to tell. Self-aggrandizement here, but thinking of Scotland, thinking of things we learned in the SCA and kind of took back to Europe.
Hey, darling, you tell those stories. Let's go.
When we were in Edinburgh, taking a tour of the castle, and the docent was talking about all the coats of arms on the windows, the stained glass windows. And most of them were on shields, but a few of them were on these sausages. And some tourists were saying, well, why is that? The docent didn't know.
You did.
Where did these?
Would you like to explain that here? It's the women.
It's the women. Yes.
Oh my God! It's primordial. We've been going
As usual, he lied about you already.
Quick
We told all
question,
your stories already.
Ivan. Who was the very first member of the chivalry in the first ceremonies? You, Mike, or Bobby?
But once we were already the Kingdom.
Bobby was first?
Yeah.
Who was the
Okay.
first? Bobby.
Robert Rampounder. Thank you.
He was the first one in
First
that,
master.
in what became the Kingdom of
Member of the
Atenveldt.
chivalry.
I knew that one, but it was not created in it.
How's things going in Horstead?
In it, well, it was,
More fun.
Could I make a comment about the, just talking about how the.
Oh, yes, you did.
We've got pictures.
Thank you.
Pardon me, Your Grace, I have duties related to court.
Go do
I'll
what
see
you
you.
What a
need to do. How
pleasure.
much
Thank
time
you
do
for all of
have?
your all's time today so much.
Thank you, Jessica.
There will be video.
Sure, y'all are getting tired of this. You need to get up and move around. Please stand up now. Just stand up. If you don't mind, we are to stand up. You have to get up and move around. If you have other places to be, we understand. I'm truly.
I'm the chair for the legislative this year, so after court, there's going to be individual interviews with Brian for the Collegium project. So
I'm already signed up.
Okay, good.
And you're also come over to our house afterwards, see me, and I'll give you a card.
And if I could give you an email address and phone number, so I can call you to discuss the display and see about what we can do there.
You've got mine.
Oh, yes.
Why don't you put this down and let them write, print in all caps, name, mundane name, SCA name, and email address.
Wow, Ivan, you could kill a party like nobody else.
I'm experienced.
What is there have back?
They've never.
Oh, that's a good one. What tradition do we want back that they don't do anymore? You can't do punch a wench, she'll kill us. Why not? No, what tradition would we like to see others bring back for themselves?
More civility.
Well, actually, one that I would like to see brought back is opening an event.
Yes.
Remember how we used to be that an event would be open by a herald standing up there saying, hear ye, enter now and leave behind all my days. And enter, and from that time on, use goblets, mugs, forget the plastic go cups from Circle K and stuff.
Turn off your cell phone.
Turn off your cell phones. We didn't used to have, no, it was a herald that all they.
You know what I would like? I would love to see a procession. Yes.
Yeah.
We used to line up and every armature was introduced by order of precedence by his or her name. I know, it would take days. But the truth is, it was absolutely an amazing thing to be able to do.
I just want to let you know that Mons does that every Christmas.
Oh, that's
Do they really?
but it's a small, yeah.
But they do everybody. Everybody that's there goes for their coordination of their investigators.
Now, a lot of people have started bringing back the Toast Memoria's laundry.
Yes.
Michael of Gloria's Laundry.
Here's Tamoria's laundry. Oh, wait, there's one other thing. Up the, do this, ready? Up the ladder and down the short road, down with King Billy and God bless the Pope.
Yep.
God doesn't do what Sarah to and send down. It's red, white, and blue.
Irma Shade.
Hey.
And I think that was a great way to end it.
Actually, one thing I would love to see brought back, misrulls.
Oh, Lord Lady misrule.
Lord Lady here.
That got us into trouble.
Courts of love.
There's so many things.
That got you
The Barony of Atenveldt still does that.
Yeah, sense of
The Barony of Atenveldt still has the Court of Love.
Has that Court of Love?
Yeah.
Well, they do.
Is it for fun?
It's different than what we're talking. It's a little different than what we're.
But we still have something.
But you're working on it, and I think that's absolutely the thing to do.
It lives.
I brought him up for taking me out to dinner and running out of, not gas in the car, water in the car on the way back to the event. The next day at the tourney, I brought him up. Court of Law.
I think we need to have more, people aren't as genteel.
Agreed.
We were never genteel.
I'm not genteel,
Don't believe it.
but
We're
There's
never genteel.
civility.
Darling, don't you understand here? I run this little organization and we'd like to bring you over and we'll finish off. You know, it's a finishing school, but I run my own and we'll finish it right off there. We're never genteel.
But no, civility, like Richard said earlier, that's more strong.
Courtesy. Courtesy.
Yeah.
Did you guys use the titles more?
No.
So when I first started, they kind of did.
I never address anybody.
Nowadays, for older people, Yeah, older people
Most-
don't know me by my SCA name. They still
Most
call
schools
me
have just
Sandra.
had more
Really?
regard.
Yeah.
See, I was, if I could.
Yeah.
But I think that's really.
Yeah, it is, depending on where you are.
Some of those got,
You and I know each other.
But I was still
And I
thinking,
owe you, I can't believe you know.
It depends.
I found pictures.
And part of it depends on this, is it on or off?
You're still all of these, your ecstasy, your ecstasy. I don't care if it's on or off.
Playing with a
Yeah, the rest of
guitar.
I was still kind of.
What I was saying, and I mentioned this one sentence, but I don't think it makes a difference. I will say it's not pictures, it's golf board. So we all knew each other. Even if we were frustrated with each other, we were to be, it was intimate, it was, right?
Yeah,
And now it's just, I went over
When we want to gather in close for ABM.
Oh, boy.
No.
I think we're gonna have to have some people standing.
Come to my house, come be get you.
Right here.
Sit.
Oh, she's gonna take her.
Really quick.
Wait, we're gonna, wait here.
Steal your chair?
If you're in it, it's yours. Okay, we're gonna sit down, I can sit down on the floor, so we're gonna sit.
I'll go stand.
Don't rush it,
Break in the
you can't
middle.
do it, you can't do it.
Rick, yeah, you sit in the middle.
You guys, get me time.
Rick, sit in the middle.
When he would build it, he'd break it, he'd be the same. Just break it.
Yeah.
So we got to where we could break it.
And what I could never understand, remember all those meat tops that we used to make that were braised together?
Okay, keep
Why
walking
we ever
down.
decided that was the right way to do it, but they were strong. We couldn't
We didn't have properly.
Yeah.
Love each other. They want pictures. Oh,
We're gonna.
love each other.
We're huggers.
Are you sure?
Hugger line.
Since when?
you got rid of my wall.
Say sunstruck.
Cheese.
That's great.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you for our beginning.
Of course, I jumped out before the.
I